I'm here at the site of the former Elsternwick public golf course, and this is an inspirational rewilding project within a stone's throw of Melbourne CBD.
All my life I've loved the natural world, and I've seen so much of it disappear bit by bit. And I've wanted for a long time to actually be able to restore something back to the natural world, to give back. And this was a chance to do just that and to do it really well.
I've been interested in nature all of my life, and this place, I suppose, focused in my interest in nature in our own local environments. I think oftentimes we write off cities as not being able to host nature as we expect it, but that's not really true actually. I think the more you look, the more you get surprised by what actually does hang on in an urban environment. I started paying a lot of attention to what was in the creek and found that there were a whole range of organisms here which you don't really associate with urban areas.
Very early on, we were very clear we want 4 goals for this reserve. We wanted environment, public amenity, water quality and flood mitigation. So very clear about what this place was going to be.
One of the things the council did, which is quite innovative, initially they set up a community reference panel, and that community reference panel has been guiding the development of first the master plan and now the creation of the chain of ponds.
The dream for this place was that it become a refuge for people and for wildlife.
Historically, it's been a golf course, but it was being underutilised, fell into a bit of disrepair.
This golf course was notoriously unkept, which was part of its key towards providing habitat for wildlife.
We had a lot of nature coming back into this space and a lot of birds coming in and using this habitat.
And it needed to be something new, and it could have been football fields, it could have been housing, it could have been cricket, and this is what the community wanted. They wanted public open space with an environmental focus.
There was a group called the Friends of Elster Creek, and their main goal was to prevent and reverse local extinctions.
Elster Creek, despite its name, is mostly a concrete drain, and there's only a couple of 100 metres of actual creek, which is between New Street and between St Kilda Street. There's huge water flows that go down it, and the small amount of creek that there is already supports a huge amount of wildlife.
There's been a huge amount of community buy into this project, and it's evident as you walk through just the very careful research of the plant lists.
The community just got behind it so hard that we've gone all out, and it's about the most perfect and carefully designed nature reserve that I can kind of imagine.
The very first thing the community reference panel did was it commissioned an organisation to put together a list of the species that we wanted to try and attract to the reserve.
They're those species which are most likely to both respond, but are also locally threatened or locally extinct. One of our major aims is to bring back superb fairy wrens. Superb fairy wrens used to be very, very common, but now they've disappeared from every inland park between the Yarra and Mordialloc Creek, and we're right in there.
What we've been doing is actually getting some baseline measurements on the numbers of species and their distribution across the site. And what we want to point to in years to come is how that bird life has exploded.
I think if we can recreate an environment from the ground up that really considers their needs and the needs of other species, I'm quite confident that we will see them return.
A separate company was engaged to put together a flora and habitat strategy. If we have the species that we want to try and attract, what do we need from a flora and habitat point of view to actually support that?
We were unusually ambitious in our plant list. Approximately half of the plants that I'm keen to repopulate this section of the reserve with haven't occurred locally since the draining of the last swamps in 1958, so they're hard to get a hold of. Australian ecosystems have gotten right behind the project, and we're keen to see all of these locally extinct species returned.
We also have really diverse and technical lists of plants that have been painstakingly collected by community members and experts, grown in our Australian ecosystem nursery and also the community nurseries, and planted with a really scientifically thought out planting plan to create layered habitat for bird species so that they have shelter and harbour and also foraging resources.
The flow-on effects will be on an ecosystem scale, but it does help to focus on certain species that we're really keen to see back in, and that's how we'll measure the success of the project.
Council established 4 goals for the reserve. One is flood mitigation, the water that flows down there in times of floods Elwood. The other is water quality. It's some of the most polluted water in Melbourne, which at the moment flows straight into the bay, providing a place for environmental values and biodiversity, and also an amazing place for communities.
It's been designed so it's got that terrific ecological function with all the habitat, and that social function, creating that beautiful urban green space, but it's also designed to slow down those pulses of stormwater, and that water is retained in this series of ponds.
All of the water will come in initially through an overgrown rain garden. So that's going to have planting and sand and filter material, and so the water from the creek will actually percolate through that. That'll remove the nutrients and some of the chemicals. And so the water that actually comes in here will be much, much higher quality than the water in the creek, and that's going to help support the wildlife.
We have a whole series of zones in these wetlands. We have open water zones so that we can have the impact of sunlight and UV sterilisation on bacteria. And then we have these fringing zones, the shallow and deep marsh, and then these ephemeral zones.
When the water recedes, the planks grow down into the ponds and actually create a richer and more diverse habitat and support a greater range of life.
This wetland's been planted with a wide diversity of aquatic plants, and a lot of those plants make up the diet of water birds. They eat juvenile aquatic plants. So we need to protect those plants for the first year, and then these plants grow rapidly. And as they mature, they become less palatable and more able to cope with bird grazing. So these nets will be taken off in 2023, and by that time, those plants will be fully established.
This creek flowing through this urban environment has helped to keep people connected to the local natural world. If people have daily access to nature and can appreciate it in their everyday lives, then they're more likely to form a relationship with it and more likely to care about the natural world as a whole.
I'm really looking forward to this place becoming a biodiversity hotspot. It's quite an ambitious rewilding project right in the heart of Melbourne, in a site that was underutilised and ecologically degraded.
There's no place like it, and hopefully it can be part of something that happens all over the globe this decade.
What this place represents, it's very aspirational for people. It's returning something to nature. This is going to be an amazing reserve for the City of Melbourne, not just for the locals.
Most of what's surviving here is doing so purely by accident. It wasn't by our effort or design. Imagine what's possible if we actually consider nature in the design or management of cities. What might be possible then?